This is very dangerous and important. I believe it represents an effort by Prime Minister Netanyahu, which he began 9 months ago, to entangle the United States in Israel's wars with the Palestinians and its neighbors. And I think if you are serious about negotiating a hostage release and a ceasefire, you don't murder your opposite number at the negotiating table. So any doubt that anyone may have had about whether Israel was sincere in pursuing an agreement with Palestinians has now been eliminated. It is not pursuing an agreement. It is instead prosecuting a war of extermination, annihilation, a genocide. And it had said from the beginning that even if there was an agreement, it reserved the right both to resume the war at a time of its choosing and to murder Palestinian officials wherever in the world they might be. So this is an indication that Israel basically is prepared to commit any crime at all. It feels no constraints. And by attacking Ismail Haniyeh and murdering him in Tehran, Israel has, of course, violated Iranian sovereignty. And the leader of Iran has said that Israel will pay a heavy price for this. We don't know what Iran will do, but it will probably almost certainly be something military. And Hezbollah, Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has said in the past that if there were an attack on Beirut, he would attack Tel Aviv. So I think this is a very dangerous moment. We must wait to see what the Palestinians and the Iranians and the Lebanese, all of whom are being brought into a war with Israel, now do.
Yeah. We've just learned that Iran, in a letter to the UN Security Council, they're stressing a serious violation against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran. And they're talking about they will authorize a special military operation against the enemy. And in your opinion, what they're asking for from the UN Security Council?
Well, I note that Lebanon plans to do the same thing. That is to protest the Israeli action to the Security Council. Of course, one of the objectives here is to align international opinion behind Iran and Lebanon when they retaliate, which they will. Now we know that Iran plans to use military means to retaliate, which it has done before, of course, and quite effectively. So that is what we know. But I think the main objective here is simply to position Iran and Lebanon better to conduct that reprisal and to warn the world publicly about what Israel has done. It appears there's no crime Israel is unprepared to commit. Genocide, murder, assassination, false flag operations. And by the way, I think there is severe doubt about whether Hezbollah, in fact, was responsible for the Falak 1 rocket that is alleged to have fallen in the Golan Heights. Hezbollah has never attacked Syrians. The people there are Syrian under Israeli occupation. The United States is alone pretty much in recognizing Israel's attempted annexation of the Golan Heights. International law says that it's part of Syria. There's no reason for Hezbollah to attack there. And also Hezbollah has been very careful to attack military installations, not civilian installations. So I suspect that is all too often the case. Israel has lied for political convenience. And the United States has idiotically signed on to the lie. So this attack on Beirut, in addition to being egregious violation of international law, is not justified. reprisal, the right of retaliation at all.
In your opinion, what has happened in the United States gave some sort of permission to Netanyahu and his administration to carry out at the same time in Beirut, in Tehran, in Syria, because these are the same kind of activities that they're doing?
Well, this exposes the tremendous contradiction in U.S. policy. On the one hand, the United States says that we want to see the war de-escalate and end. On the other hand, we provide the weapons to escalate it and continue it. There's no coherence here at all. It is completely incoherent and self-contradictory. We all know that if the United States were to end its arms supplies to Israel or provide a credible threat to do so, that Israel would not be able to conduct the war anymore. So the United States is enabling genocide, murder, and attacks on other countries. And here, I know there is an important point to bear in mind. I don't know of any other country besides Israel that feels free to attack its neighbors, bomb them, strafe them, fire rockets at them, murder their leaders at will. If the Russians do something against a hospital in Ukraine, there's an immediate international outcry from the West. When Israel destroys all the hospitals in Gaza, nobody says very much of anything. So there is a double standard, and I think the world recognizes hypocrisy when it sees it. So this has been very injurious to American credibility, and it has totally destroyed the credibility of anything Israel says.
The government in Qatar, they're talking about how we can negotiate when one side is assassinating the other side. And we know that it seems that Ismail Haniyeh was a moderate figure in Hamas, and he would be beneficial for any sort of negotiations between Hamas and Israel. In your opinion, what was the main goal after, if Israel has decided to do that? What was the main reason in their mind?
Well, I suspect, as I said earlier, if you are serious about negotiating with someone, you don't murder them. So the point that the Qatari foreign minister made is absolutely correct. This throws the whole question of the talks that we have been participating in with Israel and Hamas into doubt. And if I were Bill Burns, the director of the CIA, who has been deputized to conduct these talks for the United States, I would feel completely betrayed by Israel, which did not inform the United States of what it planned to do, and which must have understood, because Israelis are very smart, that by doing this, they ran the risk of totally ending the negotiations. I suspect Mr. Netanyahu wants Hamas to break off the talks, because that would shift the blame for the continued hostage situation from him to Hamas. Israel is now incredibly divided. There is a near mutiny in the armed forces, which do not believe in the strategy-free war of extermination that Mr. Netanyahu has ordered and this extremist cabinet has approved. The Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox in Israel, who risk now being conscripted, are up in arms about that. We just saw a riot at the worst prison in Israel for Palestinians, in which the army found itself fighting the right-wing settler movement and members of the cabinet who were attacking the prison. Of course, the reason for the attack was that the army decided to arrest 9 Israeli soldiers, prison guards, who had raped and otherwise abused a Palestinian inmate, which is a war crime, by the way. typically asked whether this was a war crime. The spokesman for the Department of State, U.S. Department of State, couldn't bring himself to say that. He said, well, I assume it's a violation of Israeli law. If anyone else in the world did what the Israelis have just done, it would be called a war crime. So again, our credibility is being destroyed by the irresponsible actions of Israelis and our condoning them.
The question is how the Biden administration right now is trying to manage the situation. Blinken said that we didn't know that it's gonna happen, or they don't know, or they're denying. We can say that they're denying that Israel did that. How do you find the policy right now in Washington?
Well, I think it is a policy of denial. It is support for Israel, while we occasionally issue mild criticism. It's particularly ironic because we accuse the Chinese, who are carrying on a normal relationship with Russia, of supporting Russia against Ukraine and NATO. But here we are supplying weapons, paying for genocide, and providing political defenses for the indefensible acts of Israel, and somehow we're not on Israel's side. I think the whole problem with the negotiations from the beginning has been that the United States is not, in any respect, a credible mediator. We are on the side of the Israelis. Everybody knows that. So everything that the United States has been talking about has been the hostages and the ceasefire to get the hostages out. What about the human rights of Palestinians? What about the genocide? What about the right of self-determination of the Palestinians? None of this is ever mentioned. So our policy is essentially untenable. It is directed by domestic political considerations. In foreign policy terms, it's a catastrophe for us.
Yeah. There is a news coming out. It says that the United States and the United Kingdom is sending their warships toward the Israeli coast in the Eastern Mediterranean. And if they didn't know that, and why they start doing this in order to help Israel if something big happened in that region?
Well, this will be explained as it was previously as an effort to prevent a war between Israel and Hezbollah. But it is clearly a gesture of support for Israel. And it makes the U.S. ships a potential target for Hezbollah. I don't think Hezbollah wants a war, certainly not with the United States, and I don't think they want a war with Israel. But Israel is trying to goad them into an attack on it, and by extension, the United States, maybe the UK as well, in order to widen the war, in order to bring the United States and the UK in. Nothing would be worse from the point of view of American and British national interests than to do that. And I think also there is a domestic political element here. Kamala Harris clearly has some feeling for the Palestinians and has expressed it. Mr. Biden has done no such thing. But the essence of the policy has not changed. And there's no indication that if elected, she would change it. Mr. Trump has said to Israel, you should finish the job and end the war. Well, by that he means finish the extermination of the Palestinians. We now have in Gaza not just what some people are now estimating may be ultimately as many as 600,000 dead. There are 21,000 babies who have been identified. There are another 25,000 that are missing and presumably under the rubble. The figures that the health ministry in Gaza has given out represent people who've been positively identified. But there are a huge number of people who've not been identified. Now we have an outbreak of polio. What does the Israeli army do? They blow up the water supply to enable the polio to spread farther. This is genocide, clear and simple. If it is indeed ultimately 600,000 Palestinians who perish from bombs, gunfire, disease, and starvation, because about 500,000 Palestinians are now literally on the brink of death from starvation, then there will be no doubt at all about this. And I think all of what has been happening with assassinations is an effort to divert attention from the international court's determination that Mr. Netanyahu and others in Israel are war criminals and should be arrested and brought to trial, like some of the people in Yugoslavia were, for less serious acts of genocide. So this is political diversion through military or intelligence action.
From what we've seen so far from Iran and Hezbollah, in your opinion, how they're going to manage the situation? We know that they're not looking after any sort of escalation with Israel, but how they can manage the situation right now?
Well, that's a problem for them. They don't want to do what Mr. Netanyahu wants them to do, which is to bring the United States and others into this war. They want to retaliate against Israel, of course. And I think Israel may have crossed a very serious line with these two assassinations. And that, one of the immediate things that would occur to any leader of Hezbollah or Hamas, or for that matter, Iran, is Israel has been murdering people right and left. And the so-called resistance has not been reciprocating this action. They have not been killing cabinet members in Israel. They have not tried to assassinate Netanyahu. They have not done anything of that sort. They have continued to play as best they can by the laws of war. Now, I don't think October 7th proves the contrary, although it was accompanied by atrocities, which are very real. Not as real as the Israelis make them out to be. Mr. Netanyahu says, well, Hamas killed 1,200 people. No, Israel killed about 600, and people associated with Hamas killed another 600. But anyway, so it's impossible at this point to unwrap all the lies and fabrications that have been developed to hide reality. But it is possible now that the self-imposed ban on counter-assassination that Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas have followed will now give way to a burst of assassinations. After all, Israel rules by terror. It tries to terrorize the Palestinians into leaving when it doesn't outright murder them. It tries to terrorize its neighbors with disproportionate retaliation for anything that happens. Why should the other side be restrained? I think this is probably a question that is being debated in Tehran and Beirut right now.